Hello, so today I have something very special and very new on my channel for you. So instead of going over drafts or solo queue rankings or any world specific stuff, today I'm going to talk about Morellonomicon, Oblivion Orb, in contrast to the item Void Stuff. So many of you have maybe followed the discussions about Morellonomicon and Void Stuff or Liandry's even. And there are many videos out there explaining in some detail why Morellonomicon especially is not that great and why you shouldn't rush it as an item. But I'm going to go a little bit more in depth into this, and I'm not going to focus on Morellonomicon because that's quite the easy topic to discuss. You don't have to prove much to show that this item is not as great as it is made up to be by pros and their item builds. So instead I'm going to focus more on Oblivion Orb and the flat pen versus the percentage pen of Void Stuff and why one is better than the other in, well, most cases. So introducing the core items of this video, the Oblivion Orb with 15 flat pen and the Sorcerer Boots with 18 flat pen. You have to note both penetrations stack additively, meaning if you get both items, you have 33 pen, flat pen that is. So in contrast to that, we have the Void Stuff with 40% pen. So getting into the numbers, this means that Void Stuff penetrates more than the Oblivion Orb if the target has 37.5 or let's say 38 MR, right? We don't have uneven values in League of Legends per se. So as Oblivion negates 15 MR flat every time, regardless of enemy MR, and Void negates 40%, so the more MR the enemy has, the more is negated. And if you're interested in the exact numbers for like 37 MR, Oblivion's 15 is then still larger than the 14.8 MR negation of Void Stuff, but after 38 MR is passed, Oblivion's 15 will be less than the Void Stuff with his 15.2 for the 38 MR value. And obviously that is the case for every MR value exceeding 38, meaning like if someone has 60 MR, Void Stuff will penetrate more than Oblivion. So 38 is the magical number. Everything below it is good for Oblivion. Everything equal to 38 or exceeding 38 is where Void takes over. So the question is how easy it is to get this MR value. So every champion in the game has a base MR value and gets MR per level. That is different from champion to champion. Some have a higher base, some have lower base, some have better growth, like MR per level growth, and some have less. So I'm not going into every champion and I'm telling you like how much MR does this champion have at level X and so on and so on. That's not interesting. We have to look at a more generalized picture. So first off, besides 3 champions, namely Orianna, Aphelios and Yuumi, every champion in the game gets to at least 38.5 MR at level 18. That's level 18, right? The max level. At that point, nearly all champions have more than 38 MR, meaning in the ultra late game where everyone is 18, Void Stuff is better in 100% cases besides these 3 champions. And we're going to get into these 3 at a later note in the video as well. So this means if you buy a void stuff, by the way, your gold will always be value as the MR is always increasing, right? But we're going into more detail in that regard also at the end. So let's take a closer look at the MR base and MR growth. So the interesting thing is many champions get to MR level 38 really quick. So at level 6, around 59 champions have 38.35 MR, so exceeding 38 by a bit. 59, that's quite a few. And that's not all. Akali and Talon exceed this cap even faster at level 2 and level 1. Talon has a base MR of 39 and Akali has one of 37, and she gets, I think it's 1.25 MR per level. So at level 2 she has 38.25 MR. So these two, yeah, it's really unclever to buy void stuff against these two, as they negate or devalue the passive penetration. So another 13 champions have 38.25 MR at level 6. Note, there are champions like Garen with his W who might not have the 38 MR at level 6 or so, but if they level their W or like another skill, or have another passive, they can exceed the MR values based on their skills or like their abilities, right? I'm not going to focus on that. I'm just going off the base numbers they gain per level and have base. So I'm not going into passives because that would be too niche. And yeah, here we're going for the best case scenario for void, no, not for voids, for Oblivion, right? So we're looking at no items, no passives, no mountain drakes, and so on. We're just going for the base and level stats. So following that, Rise and Silas also exceed this MR value at level 5. So to sum it up, only 74 champs do not have 38 or more MR at level 6. That's roughly 49% of the champions in the game. So only 49% are a target for Oblivion at level 6. So then the rest, so we have 64, 74 champions are not in range, are in range for the MR value for Oblivion. So 49% are targetable. So 51% of the champions are better than Oblivion Orb at level 6 already. So these 74 champs who don't have 38 MR at level 6, what about them? So 64 of them have that value at level 16. So that's quite a bit later in the game. What about the 10 missing? So 3 of them have it at level 13, so quite earlier, and 4 even at level 9. So that's a nice bunch already getting their value, the 38 MR before 16. And if you remember, 3 champions don't get it at any point in the game based on level. So at level 16, only 3 champions are in range of Oblivion Orb's pen. Or well, that where Oblivion Orb is better than Void Stuff. But, as I said, now what if the enemy takes MR runes? The mini MR rune gives you 8 MR. Or what if they spend 450 gold for Null Magic Mantle the 25 MR item. Simply said, if the later one is done, every champion in the game is out of the effective range of Oblivion Orb. So for 450 gold, Oblivion Orb is not useless, right? The pen is not like negated, but the pen is way less efficient, or less efficient at all, in comparison to the void stuff. And that's just on the simple base front level. There's much more going on at later stages. And even the 8 MR rune pushes every but 3 champions to 38 or more MR. This is based on the base MR value, right? So the first conclusion we have is that even in most cases, Oblivion Orb is not even effective in the early game. Well, we're going into that. And why is that? Because Oblivion Orb is built as a second item. It's usually after Luden's Echo, right? In some cases after a Protobalt. I looked into some high elo games, and I found out that people finish the first item around 12.7 minutes. 0.7, not sure what that is in seconds, but I guess it's like 48 or whatever. So around about 13 minutes, and that's high elo, right? That's EU Challenger is what I looked at. So that is if you get all the XP from the minions as the laner, right? We're looking at mid lane here, right? Because that's the most usual lane for Oblivion Orb buyers. For jungle, yeah, you can go Oblivion Orb earlier than that because your jungle item is usually cheaper than the mid lane starting item. But you have to imagine the enemy levels are still coming in. So yes, you get your Oblivion Orb earlier, but you also have less gold, so you need to get more value from your item. We're going to get into gold value a bit later. But the question is, right, 12 minutes is where Ludens comes in most of the time for high elo players. But the question is 12 minutes. So if I buy Oblivion Orb after that, right, like get the 1600 gold, let's say that's like minute 15 or something. What level are enemy players then? Or, to be more precise, are they level 6, yes or no? Because if we remember, most champions at level 6 are not in range, or not in the optimal MR value for Oblivion Orb's pen. And the thing is, you can be level 6 at around 5 minutes, more or less, take a few seconds. It depends on like if you get zoned, if you roam, what your recalls are, like if you recall and so on, right? If you die, if you get kills, you can get level 6 faster or slower than 5 minutes. But roundabout 435 is a like most optimal theoretical value based on minions, like no kills. But let's say 5 minutes for like a better average. But we notice 5 minutes, well, that's a bit faster than the 13 minutes for Ludens and the probably 15 minutes for white stuff, for the orb. Yeah, it means that in most cases, even in the early game, even if you rush Oblivion Orb as a second core item, most champions or many champions have out-leveled, out-MR valued the Oblivion Orb pen. Yeah. Please note most of these numbers are theoretically. As I said, if you zone, if you get kills, if you're like these numbers are high from high elo. So if you're a worse player, in low elo, you will get like less last hits, less kills, less XP probably. So you get level 6 slower. You get your first item slower because you're not as good as in last hitting and so on. So in low elo, Oblivion Orb second is even worse because you are worse than high elo champions, and even in high elo the numbers are not looking great for Oblivion Orb Rush. Yeah. So even if everything is working as intended, right, you rush it first. And even if the enemy champion is one of these 49%, right, where at level 6 they're still not out-leveled the 38 MR. The enemy can just counter you with a mini rune of 8 MR or a null magic mantle for 450 gold. So some exceptions where you could look into this are if you're like snowballing, don't go for Luren, so a cheaper first item. If you're an assassin, especially, it's a bit different because then your enemy is not the usual champion, but backline champions, ranged champions, and not in all cases, but in many cases, ranged champions fall into the 49% of the champions that are still effective. So if you're an assassin, you could opt for it, but it's still true. At 16, you're out leveled, your pen is out leveled, and it's still true that the rune will cuck you, and the 450 gold investment will still negate in brackets, right? Your 1600 gold item. And if the passive is negated, it's not negated, right? It's still there, but it's not efficient anymore. And if you negate or not look at the passive, Oblivion's gold value is only 60.52%. So it's not even slightly good. Like it's not even close. Like it's not close to 100% gold value. Stat-wise, it's not a good item. Only if you look at the passive, then it becomes decent. But the passive is easily worked around with, right? Also, some comments about the 450 gold on the enemy being totally wasted. Well, they spent 450 gold, you spent 160 gold, 1600 gold. So theoretically, they make 1150 gold plus in devaluing your item, right? They not make it value 0, but decrease the value of your gold. But that's also not the only case. So if your team has, well, A, lots of CC, or B, many other AP champions, the enemy mid laner probably also wants to go for Mercury threads because they don't want to be CC'd and they want to get the MR for the many AP sources of damage on your team. So yeah, note if you're the only AP damage source in your team, the 450 gold will hurt your enemy more than if you're a full AP team comp or if you have much CC in your team. That's also something you have to keep in mind. But that's like in most team comps, you're not the only AP source because solo queue isn't that great at drafting, and well, also you probably have lots of CC because like in low elo, CC champs are really good and people should draft them and many draft them. So yeah, another point, the 450 on the enemy it's not wasted gold, it's smartly invested gold because it negates your gold, the gold spent, and it's still effective for the other enemies your enemy is facing, so your teammates, right? But enough of that. Let's look at the Morellonomicon. There is a lot online, so I might repeat what others have said, but still I'm going to mention it to have this all bunched in one video. So, if Oblivion is fine in very few cases, what about the finished completed form Morellonomicon? Everyone has probably heard it's not cost efficient, but let's look at the math. So, Oblivion Orb is 1600 gold, and we're not going into the gold value of that item. We're going to look into the 1400 gold we spent extra to complete Oblivion into Morellonomicon. So for the 1400 gold, what do you get? You get 50 AP, 100 HP, and in the passive 3 seconds of grievous wounds. So now we have to do a bit math and look what are these stats worth in gold. So to get the gold values of these stats, I took Amplifying Tom for the AP, 435 gold, and yeah, I divided that through the AP value and found out 1 AP is 21.75 gold. Means our 50 AP is worth 1087 gold, 87.5 gold. That's not that bad, right? Following along, the 100 HP, I looked at the ruby crystal for 400 gold and 150 HP, divided that and found out 1 HP is worth 2.67 gold. Means 267 gold for 100 HP. So good so far. The 3 second grievous wounds were a bit tricky to figure out because there's no item that only gives this stat. So I looked at the item which is closer to that, and that's Executioner's. Executioner's Calling, right? It costs 800 gold and gives 15 AD plus the Grievous Wounds passive. Also note, you have to pay attention. There are many Grievous Wounds passives, like 5 seconds and 3 seconds is what I remember. And Executioners and Morello both give this 3 seconds, so you have to pay attention to that if you're doing the math at home. So the 15 AD roughly translates into 525 gold. So we have to subtract the 800 minus the 525 gold. So the Grievous Wounds is what's left, and that's then the 275 gold which is left. If we are going for like total effectiveness of the item, right? And that's how we do it for this stat gold calculations. You can look that up if you're interested in it in more detail. There are some pages online where you can check the math and the stat value for other stuff. So we're now adding all of that up, and it roughly comes out to 1629.5 gold in stats. So we spent only 1400. That's great, right? We get more gold than what we spent. Yeah, but this depends heavily on the passive, the Cursed Strike, the 3 second grievous wounds, the 275 gold. So if we subtract that, it's only 1354.5 gold, which is quite a bit less than the 1400 gold which we spent. So note, that's the first thing we have to look at. If you can't make use of the passive, you're being scammed, and the passive only adds the fact, like Cursed Strike only activates on the enemy if you deal magic damage. So just auto-attacking doesn't work. Or like physical spells, I don't know, like they don't work either. It has to be magic damage, and then only the passive is applied. So if the passive is wasted or not even applied, you're getting scammed and the gold is not equal to the stats you gain. So, if you need, so concluding that for Morello, if you need anti-healing, Morello is good and even efficient in its stats. But that's not the point anyone ever denied, right? That's no one ever said, like, if you need grievous wounds, don't buy Morello, right? Morello was always the healing shredding item. The only critique is, if the enemy has no healing and you're rushing Morello, you're wasting gold because you don't get what you pay for. You get less. Remember that. So, it's not efficient to go to rush Morello. Don't dump the 1,400 gold. You could spend this gold more effective. Or remember, or think about it. If you spend, or like if you waste this gold, right? You don't, like you complete an item, you don't work into your next item. You don't buy components, right? You just finish something that is already okay-ish. You don't excel, you don't accelerate. You're just taking a small step, right? And wasting a bit of gold on the way. The enemy can spend their gold more cost efficiently and buy better items, and they could outstat you even if you have more gold spent. So you want to make sure you spend your gold correctly, because that's where you allocate your lead, right? In your items. Gold itself is worth nothing much, right? You need to spend it efficiently to gain the stats you need, so you can then excel in combat and then push your lead, right? So that's the reason why you recall. That's the reason why you buy items. And yeah, so just spending your money or like just completing an item, it's not a good argument, especially if you think about it. 1,400 gold. What can you do with that? So you could buy a needlessly large rod and 2 control rods. Or you could go for a blasting wand and an M-tome and a control ward, and you still have 400 gold left. That's just 2 options. They don't give the grievous wounds and they don't give health, right? But they give more AP. Morello completion gives 50 AP if you remember. Both options needlessly give 60, and the wand and the M-tome together they also give 60 AP. So in raw damage, these options give you more damage than the Morello completion, right? If you can't make use of the health, because like you get one shot either way, or the enemy can't even touch you, then the health is useless in a sense. And if the enemy isn't even healing, the grievous wounds are completely useless and even hurt your gold value more. So yeah, don't waste your 1,400 gold. Then many people say, yeah, but then if the enemy has much healing, like a Mundo, then I should buy Morellos in every game, right? Well, yes, but no. So if the enemy is healing a bunch, Morello is usually a good idea, but you still have to consider a few things. Well, am I able to spread grievous wounds? Can I apply the 3-second debuff again and again? Do I even want to fight the healer? And even other stuff like, does your teammates already have a bunch of executioners? What do these questions mean? Am I able to spread grievous wounds? So if you have AoE, you can apply it to multiple targets and like get more value out of it, right? But if you're a single target assassin, for example, then you can't really do that. You only like kill one target, and even if you're an assassin, you burst, so the enemy doesn't even have a chance to heal up. So if you don't have AoE, it's not that great, right? Especially if you don't even want to fight the healer. So if you're a control mage and you just like blow your load all over the team fight, like a consistent DPS champion like Azir, and you try to hit the backline, but you obviously also fight front to back and kill the enemy frontline, then like damaging a Mundo and applying grievous wounds is good, and you can do that. Going back to the assassin example, you don't want to fight Mundo. Just because the enemy has the Mundo, you don't want to go for Morello, because you don't even want to fight Mundo. You don't want to damage him. You want to kill the enemy backline. So just because the enemy team has healing, or like abundance of healing, you don't rush Morello. If you're not fighting the healer, if the healing target is not your target, well, then it makes no sense. Second point, the grievous wounds only last for 3 seconds. So 3 seconds is a lot in League of Legends, because the game is quite fast. But 3 seconds also run out quite fast, because it's just 3 seconds. So you have to apply the debuff again and again on the core targets. If you're an assassin, you want to kill the enemy in less than 3 seconds. If you're a control mage, then that's okay, because, well, you want to do constant DPS, and then you want to do it for more than 3 seconds, and as you're doing it AoE in most cases, this is not a problem for you. This is mostly focused on these assassin champions that rush Morellos. Even if the enemy has healing, it's not a good idea. If you're a control mage and you can spread the grievous wounds, apply the debuff again and again, and you want to fight the healer like a Mundo, like a frontliner, right? Then Morello is completely fine against healing champions. But if you don't want to fight the healer, if you can't apply it, and if you kill the enemy in the time frame of the debuff, it's not that great. And, well, as I said before, if you AD carry and your top laner and your jungler maybe already have executioners, or like you have 5 ignites on your team, because ignite also gives you grievous wounds, Morello, even against healing, might not be the smartest option. So that's about it for the main thing. So we're going into a few niche things and theoretically numbers now and then. So cheap, the Void stuff costs more than the Oblivion Orb. So the flat pen is cheaper, but there's even a better and cheaper option than the Oblivion Orb, and that's the Sorcerer Boots. It penetrates 18 instead of 15, and it costs less. So maybe you're interested in, okay, but it's the same problem, right? Void outscales the boots, and that is true, but only at MR level 41. And not all champions reach 41. So flat pen boots do their work for most targets. Remember, still, if the enemy elects to go MR runes or by the null magic mantle, the boots are still worse than the void stuff, right? If the enemy has any ounce of bonus MR, void stuff is better. Like, even a tiny bit of bonus MR tips the scales in void stuff's favor. And, well, in comparison to the Oblivion Orb, 15 is less than the 18 pen. You want to upgrade your boots in any case. It's cheaper, and I would say it's the better choice, right? Especially because it's cheaper. Like, it's 500 gold less, and I think it's 200 health of void stuff, 200 health, 20 AP, I think it is. These are not great stats. It's just the 15 pen which you're looking at for Oblivion Orb. Then some might argue, okay, what about selling, right? So you go for Oblivion Orb, or you go for the shoes, or you go for either. and then you sell them later. What about that option, right? You get gold back, and so like for the short duration till level 16 or till they get MR, I'm really strong. That is an option, but it's also not great. So Oblivion Orb costs 1600 gold and it sells for 1120 gold. That means you lose 480 gold by selling. The shoes only cost 1100 gold, and you could even subtract the 300 gold for the Boots of Speed, because that's an item you should buy in every game unless you're a snake. So they sell for 770 gold, so you only lose 330, which is less than the Oblivion Orb, right? It's 150 less. And the cool thing is, in some cases, I would even recommend selling the Sorcerer's Shoes, right? First of all, 330 is not that much in the late game. In addition, having Ionian boots or Mercury boots is nearly always a greater thing, right? The 18 flat pen is mostly neglectable in the late game, right? You have so much damage that you kill your key targets either way, and the 18 pen doesn't bother the tanks, right? So getting the extra cooldown reduction for your spells or the summoners is really nice, and the 25% tenacity for Mercury's, or the what is it? The magic resistance from Mercury's is also cool. So yeah, I argue in some cases going for sorcerers for the early like power spike, right? If you elect to snowball, or if you try to, and then sell them later on if gold isn't that much of an issue, right? But 330 gold, if you're good at last hitting, you get that in like 32 seconds, right? So yeah, that's always an option. So if you're interested in the sell option, Oblivion Orb again is not the way. Go for the boots. Well, they are cheaper, and even if you sell, you lose less gold, so double bonus for the boots against the orb. Yeah. So then again, remember, the 450 gold, Merc Threads or MR rune are not a waste if you have CC or AP champions on your team. But if you are the only AP champion, and let's say you're an assassin, you could go for Oblivion, but then you have to hard carry and snowball and try to elect the game before level 16, right? Because by then, even if the enemy is not financially able, like able in brackets, to spend the 450 gold for the null magic mantle, they outlevel your pen. So in cases of hard snowball, and where you're the only AP source of damage, as an assassin, the argument could be made to look for for an orb. Yeah, and for that there's an even more interesting snowball effect. So sorcerers and void together pen 33 MR. So depending on enemy level and base stats, this could be true damage. So if you're the only AP source, this could be a really strong 8 item combo to really pack a punch, right? Still, 8 MR, rune, and the 450 gold, like not negate but devalue your gold spent. That's still true, because 33, right? And if the enemy has, like, let's assume at a moderate level, like 35, 36 MR, and they get +8, they are still above the 33, and then they are still above the 38 value. Yeah. But there's an interesting strategy that some Korean solo queue mid players like Dopa and Yukal do, or did. And that is, like, as usually, go for your lost chapter, and then look. If you get fed, then you could go for a pen rush before you finish Ludens, right? So you get the pen items extra early, but you can afford them because you got fed, right? So you ride a high wave and you try to snowball more with an investment that is short-term focused. But you have to remember, it's only a short-term damage burst, right? Because it will get out-leveled and it can easily be outspent. So if you die and give shutdown, the enemy can go for 450 gold, null magic mantle, and really hurt your damage output. So you have to be good enough to like correctly snowball your advantage and the lead you have from these items in these early times of the game. So I would not recommend it for most cases, but if you're like smurfing or a really good player, like just want to try it out, it could be an option. Lost chapter, and then depending on what gold you have, a sorcerer and Oblivion. So another fact, like I'm just stating random stuff, random trivia to this topic, right? We have discussed the most pressing issues about these items, and these are just like niche infos you might be interested in. As you might be wondering, how much better is Void Staff as level 18? Well, without MR items, right? So the highest MR at level 18 without the items, Ocean Drake, Mountain Drake, and so on, has Silas, and I didn't note down the exact MR values, but the 15 pen of Oblivion is way less than the 24.7 pen a Void Staff gives you, right? And still remember, these numbers are all optimal case for the Oblivion Orb, right? The enemy just has the minimum amount of MR at this points of time. So then a normal melee champion, 15 pen will be less than the 21.34 pen of Void Staff. And for a normal ranged champion at level 18, it's quite close. 15 pen will be less than 15.32 pen of the Void Staff. And well, Aphelios and Oriana have 34.5 and Yumi has 30.1. These are obviously the options where the orb beats the staff. But, well, no. So Oriana has her passive on her E, I think. Yeah, on her E. So if she self-casts E, it gives her up to 10 to 30 MR. So if Ori has the ball on her, her 34 can easily be 64.5. So even if Oriana doesn't have that high stats, if she has her ball on herself, Void Staff will be way better. And then for Yumi, it doesn't matter, right? Like Yumi is never your target. You can't hit her unless you killed her host, and then killing a stray Yumi, I mean, even a tank Soraka would be able to one-shot Yumi, right? It doesn't matter, right? An Oblivion penetration is overkill on a Yumi. Also with Yumi's usual build path, she will get MR, unless she goes like full damage, then maybe not. But a support Yumi will get MR 100%. So yeah, Aphelios might be the only champion where Orb is nearly always better than the staff, because in AD carry Aphelios is not usually itemizing magic resistance. Yeah, one champion out of 152 I think we have at the moment, with Samira coming out. Yeah. So, additionally, if you remember, normal range champions at 18 have like the Void Staff has only 0.32 more penetration. This doesn't seem much, but then again, remember, this is without MR runes, any MR item, or Mountain Drake. This is the best case for the Orb, and also Oblivion, the Oblivion Orb, right? Not the Morello, gives 50 less AP, and is more or less a dead slot, cause in most cases you don't want to go for Morellos. Yeah, so in the late game, if you don't want to get scammed by Boris, aka you don't want want lost gold efficiency in the item slot, you would have to sell the orb for the void staff, and then you would lose the 480 gold, right? Because you bought it for 1,600 and you sell it for 1,120. So Oblivion Orb is not that great, like in most cases. In the utmost cases, even Oblivion Orb, which many say it's so much better than the Morellos, and that's true, but even that item is not that great in comparison to the Void Staff. And, well, many people have noticed that, like many EU pro players, you don't even, like, they go for Void Staff second item, because in most cases, it will penetrate more than the than the orb. So, but common argument that is often heard, right? Not in this debate, but in others, like going for Trinity instead of Black Cleaver, right? And they say, oh, but Trinity is so much more expensive, and that's such a like bad argument. But let's look at that. So Void Staff is obviously in nearly any case the better item, right? And it's more expensive. It's 1,250 gold more. But how much more is that really? So if we take the least average value for wave, right? Like calculating how much money a wave gives before level 20, I think was where these numbers from. You just need about 3.5 waves to farm that, right? If you get all the CS, right? If you miss every CS, then, well, yeah, you might spend the entire day. But if you CS 3.5 waves, yeah, you got your gold, right? And this is not taking into account passive gold income, right? You get gold per second in the game. So this is not even taken in. Then you remember, so okay, it's 3.5 waves, so how much does that take? So roughly speaking, every wave spawns every 30 seconds. They need some time to get there, but while the waves walk to the center of the lane, you're killing the wave before that, so we can reduce that traveling time. So it's just killing and wave spawning. It's 90 to 90 seconds to like 2 minutes, and 2 minutes of time, it's not that much. It's really not that much. And right, if you get kills, you get the gold even faster. If you get assists, you get the gold even faster. If you get turret plates, if you can steal jungle camps from the enemy jungler, you get the gold even faster. So the argument, it's not that good because it's not as cheap. If you're looking for a cheap item, I already told you, go for the shoes, right? I already explained why the shoes are better in many cases, right? And more cost efficient and smart with your gold, right? You don't want to waste your gold. Your gold is precious, right? Everything you do in League, it comes from your gold, just because your gold is your stats, are your stats. So these 90 to 2 minutes are a good investment for the future. So, but why future? Theoretically speaking, if you buy a Void, like quite early in the game, the item value increases over time, right? Because the enemy might get MR items. The enemy will level up. So, if the enemy has only 38 MR, it negates 15.12 MR. You can calculate flat penetration. I don't remember the exact calculation, but this 15.12 MR negation calculates roughly to 470.232 gold. This is based off Sorcerer Boot's penetration, right? So check that out if you're interested in the details of that calculation. But then in the late game, right, where the normal melee champ at 18 has, right, without items, without rakes and so on, without runes, has 53.35 MR. It negates 21.34 magic resistance, right? And that calculates roughly to 663.674 gold. Right, that's without items, like, and melee champions will get MR items in most cases, right? Unless they're melee assassins, they usually don't. But melee tanks, melee junglers, melee supports, like some way they will get some MR. Like, and then again, runes and drakes, like there could be like 2 mountain drakes, or just one mountain drake, and like these numbers are even more in favor of white stuff. These are optimal cases for the orb, right? Because I want you to see how clearly in the optimal case, even then, how better void stuff is. But getting back to the numbers, theoretically, your void stuff stock, your void stuff investment gained you 193.442 gold in value, like over the game, right? Because as the enemy got more MR, your penetration gets more, and by that your gold value of the penetration increases. So buying void stuff is like big brain stonks. Yeah, that rounds it up. Yeah, at the end it got a bit all over the place, but it was more trivia here and there, some niche infos, which are a bit more nerdy maybe than the main argument of stat efficiency, passive usage, and the base MR values and the MR growth, which are the main arguments for Void and against the Orb and against the Cursed Book. Then some trivia with the shoes. If you have some questions or might be interested in where I get those numbers, you can just ask in the comments. I will see to it that I answer and send you links. Yeah. So remember, don't get scammed. Just think about who is your target. Look and calculate what will they build, what will they buy. Click on the champions. Do they have the MR rune? Or check on op.gg or somewhere like that, where you can see the runes of the enemy. So, and if that is the case, or if a mountain drake is spawning and you don't have that one to 100%, then don't buy the orb, and definitely don't just blind rush Morello, because yeah, you don't want to finance Boris even more. Anyway, hope you're all having a great day, and see you around.